Good morning and welcome to session 4 of Isaiah. We've talked at the very beginning when we went into Isaiah 1. Isaiah began chastising the people of Jerusalem and giving them God's plan. And he says, it's real simple: wash, cleanse, remove, stop. We went into Isaiah 6, 8. And look, ironically, this is one of those weeks where like everything in the universe like lines up perfectly for my lesson. Ironically, Pastor preached about Isaiah and Jeremiah and Jonah. And here, Isaiah 6 is where he says, here I am sending, right? Last week, we talked about what was going on. We talked about King Ahaz, and we talked about Israel and Damascus and what was happening in Ephraim and how he had an opportunity, but Ahaz did not support and did not believe in God's word, right? So he made a choice to partner with Damascus, Rezin, and it led to his downfall. And today, our lesson jumps all the way to chapter 23 on a lesson that's called God Reigns, right? So let's just recap where we're at and how it was such a crazy time. I've shown this graphic a lot in regards to the timeline. Oh, first off, I need one reader. I've got one reader. There'll be 4 segments, and we're going to go through chapter 23, verses 8 to 18. That'll be like basically 4 segments. It'll all be on screen, but can I get one person? Okay, John, thank you. So yeah, if you want to flip to Isaiah 23, John, verse 8. But we see all the kingdoms, all the kings. And one of the things Isaiah has been very clear about in all of his prophecies that we've been looking at, right, is that kings and kingdoms fail. What did we see this week? That was a lot of people's hopes. Some people are absolutely fulfilled this week because what they put their hope in has come true. Some people are devastated this week because what they put their hope in didn't come true. All right. So this came out in July. So this, ironically, has nothing at all to do with what's going on in the nation this week. But in July, the APA, the American Psychological Association, did a huge poll, and something like 23,000 people. And those stats came out that 83 say the future of our nation is a significant social stress. Now, of course, this was, after the second peak, and this was the height of the epidemic and everything going on that caused the spikes after Memorial Day. So this was released July 20th. Right, 83% say the nation is a significant source of stress, and 72% say that this is the lowest point of the country's history that they've ever known. Right. So yeah, we're all stressed. We just all deal with it in different ways. We all cope in different ways. Some healthy, some unhealthy. Some people put it aside and don't even deal with it. Right. So we're going to jump to something in Isaiah where very, very similar times, right? Where countries were failing, kingdoms were failing, and you had a prophet that was just trying to give some clarity to the people about what was going on. So I love some of the memes that came out this week, right? And when I looked at my Instagram and my Twitter feed and Facebook feed, that, right? I saw this one the most. Right? A lot of people just declaring, look, it doesn't matter who the president is, Jesus is king. My favorite one by far was from Louis C.K. When you have bacon in your mouth, man, that doesn't matter. And then you guys know I'm from Zion. So I'm a huge fan of the Matrix. And my boy Morpheus says, what's it like told you? In America, it doesn't matter who becomes it, because it's the corporations that are controlling the government. So just to recap before we jump into chapter 20, right? So we left, and remember that in Isaiah 11, we get that prophecy about the stump of Jesse, right? And there are a couple prophecies that happened in Isaiah 9, Isaiah 11 that we jumped over. In Isaiah 13, he makes this huge prophecy against Babylon, right? In 15 and 16, there's a prophecy against Moab. In 17, there's a prophecy against Damascus, right? Babylon, another part of Babylon in Syria. Then there's a prophecy against Cush. Chapter 19 is a prophecy against Egypt, right? In chapter 20, Isaiah makes a prophecy against Egypt and Cush, right? Y'all both failed Jerusalem, so now we're going to talk bad about both of them. In 21, another one specifically for Babylon and how Babylon is going to fall, right? So the first one in 13 and 14 was about how evil Babylon is, and we'll prophesy against what you worship and what you do. And now this is the prophecy in 21 about, no, you guys are going to go down for all of it. In chapter 22, Isaiah goes and he talks right back up to his people, but he also gives them a little bit of hope in Isaiah 22. So if you're looking at this from a 30,000 foot view, it seems, dude, Isaiah is ticked off everybody, and it doesn't matter who you are, he's going to prophesy. And the Lord Jehovah, the Lord of Israel, the Lord of Judah, has things to say to all these different nations. Really, really interesting, right? It's all right. So you're about to get taken over. The Assyrians are coming. We know Jerusalem's about to fail. Why on earth is Isaiah, talking about just basically everyone? So remember, he is here. We're in the southern kingdom of Judah, right? And just to preface before we jump into chapter 23 is, the preface of all this is the prophecy against Tyre. Now, I show this map because I want you to see that we are way up here. And then, obviously, just recently, right, in all these chapters, 13 to 22, all around the map, Isaiah is prophesying against all these different kingdoms, right? Now, Tyre is way at the very top. Tyre is way there. It's a Phoenician state, right, which becomes part of Assyria, right? So in the ancient Near East, the gods were thought to be very, very territorial, right? The gods of Damascus, the gods of Ammon or Moab are concerned only about their people. All of a sudden, Isaiah comes out in all these chapters I just kind of reviewed, right? What you doing talking about everybody? Why are you in everyone's business? So people at the time also believed that when nations fought, their gods fought for them, right? Their gods fought the gods of the opposing nations. So you fight physically, and the gods fight spiritually in the realm. And as we just saw from chapters 13 and 23, Isaiah responded. He presented the oracles against the nations as evidence that the God of Judah can and will judge the other nations. Right? And finally, as a reminder for the people, right, this was, in Isaiah 22, right, they should not trust in the values of the nations around them, such as power and wealth and worldly wisdom. So ancient Phoenicia, right, just so you guys understand, that little thing that we saw up here. So the Phoenician state was all along the eastern edge of the Mediterranean coast, right? Now, we are also going to jump into a little bit about what Pastor preached about this morning, which was the story of Jonah, right? Now, if you guys know your geography, Jerusalem is here. Nineveh is like way over here. So Nineveh is northeast in what would be modern Turkey, right? So Nineveh is like way east. And where did Jonah go? Tarshish. Okay, he escaped to Tarshish, right? So I've got verses 1 through 7, John, and then I'll get you to take care of 8 through 18. So a prophecy against Tyre. So remember, Tyre is one of the pinnacle cities in all of Phoenicia, right? So a prophecy against Tyre, wail, you ships of Tarshish. For Tyre is destroyed and left without house or harbor in the land of Cyprus, word has come to them. Be silent, you people of the island, and merchants of Sidon, whom the seafarers have enriched. On the great waters came the grain from the sky. The harvest of the Nile was the revenue of Tyre, and she became the marketplace of the nations. Be ashamed, Sidon, you fortress of the sea, for the sea has spoken. I have neither been in labor nor given birth. I have neither reared sons nor brought up daughters. When word comes to Egypt, they will be in anguish at the report from Tyre. So look, he's talking about a lot of different Sidon, Tyre, all the way down to Egypt, right? Verse 6, cross over to Tarshish. Wail, you people of the island. Is this your city of revelry, this old city whose feet have taken her to settle in far off lands? All right, so once again, it's just a recap. Before we get, and John jumps into verse 8, it's just understanding that they are making their money on trade. Okay, Tyre is this huge port city that's been enriched by commercial trade. And back then, all the commercial trade was by boat, right? So spices from the east and linens from the west and food and obviously seafood and all the stuff that they were trading back at the time, like jewelry and pottery, weapons, right? Now, something else to understand. Tyre is right here. Jerusalem is way down here. Nineveh, we're talking about, is northeast there, right? Verse 6, cross over to Tarshish, wail, you people of the island, right? So at the time that Isaiah was writing this is the known world, and Tarshish was as far as you could go, and Pastor even said it himself this morning, right? It is in the southern tip of Spain. So when Jonah was escaping from God, Jonah was going to the furthest place that they knew of at the time, because they knew that once they got past the Strait of Gibraltar, it was ocean for weeks and weeks and weeks, right? So here's the ancient world, right? We saw Jonah went here instead of there, right? And this is where we are starting as we jump into, verse 18, right? Ancient Tyre, this is their marketplace. What does that look like? It was in my title, so I guess on the graphic at the very first slide. Huh? It looks like an ancient temple. Any of you ever been to Rome? Right? It looks just like the Forum in Rome. Right? So, outdoor marketplace, huge place of trade. It was a huge city and port. Right? You see the Mediterranean Ocean, right? But Tyre, major Phoenician center of trade and power, major port of trade, right? And John, if you would read verses 8 to 10.
Planned this against Tyre, the bestowers of crowns, whose merchants are princes, whose traders are renowned in the earth. The Lord Almighty planned it, to bring down her pride and all her splendor, to humble all who are renowned on the earth. To your land, as they do along the Nile, daughter Tarshish, for you no longer have a harbor.
Okay, so real quick. Who is your? He's the modern day equivalent of this would be New York City, the largest center of commercial trade at the time. Right? So for us nowadays, New York City is the pinnacle of Wall Street, the financial markets, right? And obviously, world economic engine, because everything is based on the US dollar, everything like that. But what does he say here in verse 9 that I just highlighted? Who's going to bring this down? The Lord. Right? So God's plan was to desecrate and disgrace the city and the people of Tyre. Can you think there's something else maybe that's happened in our lifetime in terms of desecrating the financial capital of the world? Our lifetime. 9/11. I mean, we often, how for like our parents, the question was, what happened to you and your family during World War II and all that stuff. And our generation was, where were you on 9/11? Very, very similar situation. God is going to bring destruction to the financial and trade capital of the ancient world. Right? And the cause for this punishment was common human feeling. It was their pride. You guys have put all of your hope in what you do, what y'all can accomplish, your commercial trade, right? What you have built, the industry that I'm going to tear down your pride is what Isaiah is prophesying here in verse 9, right? Y'all know that Egypt's a desert, right? So what they typically did at the time was they had to flood everything, they had to flood the Nile, right? So that all the silt would, because you can't grow it in a desert, but they did, right? So here this is just a reference to what they did to have to survive and to grow crops in the economy of Eastern Egypt, right? So God did that. God got all these ways to grow in the desert, do all the stuff, make trade, make money, and all that stuff. And Isaiah is saying, woe to them. I'm going to bring that down, right? And finally, right at the end of verse 10 right there, Tarshish is no longer a safe harbor for commerce and trade. Right? I'm going to bring that down too. John, if you would keep going and read verse 11 and 12.
The Lord has stretched out his hand over the sea and made its kingdoms tremble. He has given an order concerning Phoenicia that her fortresses be destroyed. He said, no more of your reveling. Virgin daughters Sidon now crushed. Up, cross over to Cyprus. Even there you will find no rest.
Okay. So if you guys go there, this is just like one of the places I would just love to visit. I'm dying for a Mediterranean cruise.
Yeah, I'm not ready for a cruise right now.
But ancient Tyre was a fortress city, right? So they had walls all around it, right? So what you see there, and of course all we have now is all the ruins, right? So like if you go around the city, you see the base of the walls, and some places it's up 3 feet, and some places it's up 8 feet, and some places like you barely see it kind of wrap around the circumference of the island, right? But it used to be this amazing fortress city with all the docks, all the ports, all the ways to bring in trade, and everyone felt safe, right? But the Lord has stretched out his hand and made the kingdom tremble, and the fortress, this fortress that used to be Tyre, Isaiah is saying it, and at the time that he's saying it, this is like prophesying against New York City in 2000. After the Yankees had won the Subway Series. I mean, it was at the pinnacle of all things. You would have never thought that this could be destroyed, right? Verse 12 right there, Tyre is compared to a young woman who has been ravished. So once again, he's prophesying in the future. This hasn't happened at the time that he's proclaiming this, and he's prophesying to Jerusalem, right? So it's about to be destroyed. I want to open this up first to online, right? Graduates, right? In what ways have we put our trust in the structures and institutions of our lives?
I guess our government. That's a big one?
Big one. How many of you guys have already started saving for college for your kids?
Yeah.
How many of you guys have 401ks or savings
Oh, well, I used to.
or life insurance? How many of you guys annually check your Medicare Social Security statement? Right?
No, we're not gonna have that.
We're never gonna see that anyway, so why are people running belly?
I mean, they mail me the statement, I look at it.
But for us, aren't those institutions and structures of our lives? Things that we put hope and faith in. Andrew, can you think of anything?
I couldn't hear that. What?
Can you think of anything in terms of structures or institutions that we put our faith and our hope and our dependence?
Well, I was thinking about how, I guess in I guess what people term the social contract, we're all agreeing to, every day we go out and we count on everybody else, paying attention when they're driving, and not deciding to kill us when we make them mad. And we're relying on everybody else to do the right thing all the time, essentially.
Harris, is anything you guys?
Just law and order from, we have, what Andrew was saying about traffic laws and stuff. I mean, that's part of our societal laws that our government passes. So I guess faith in that shell of a structure of an.
Which is fascinating, right, Ryan? Because this has been the week where people have started to question, are all the rights and the liberties that we put forth in the Bill of Rights and the Constitution and all these structures that we believe in, is that freedom going to be taken away, right? Are my guns going to be taken away? Is my Social Security going to be taken away? Is my private health insurance going to be taken away? Is what I hold on to the institutions of our day? Does God even care about
The evidence points to no.
it? Say that a little louder.
I said the evidence points to no. When Pilate asked Jesus if he would be king, he said that his kingdom is not as of this earth. When he was asked to pay taxes, he got a coin out of a fish, but he paid his taxes. And if he was going to do a crusade against Rome, he would have done a crusade against Rome. He didn't.
John, if you would pick up this and read verses 13 to 16.
Look at the land of the Babylonians, this people that is now of no account. The Assyrians have made it a place for desert creatures. They raised up their siege towers, they stripped its fortresses bare and turned into a ruin. Wail, you ships of Tarshish, your fortress is destroyed. At that time, Tyre will be forgotten for 70 years, the span of a king's life. But at the end of these 70 years, it will happen to Tyre as in the song of the prostitute. Take up a harp, walk through the city, you forgotten prostitute. Play the harp well, sing many a song, so that you will be remembered. At the end of 70 years, the Lord will deal with Tyre. She will return to her lucrative prostitution.
Oh, you can stop right there. What did he just say?
Sing a song.
No, yeah.
Sorry.
says the musician. What did Isaiah just prophesy on in regards to Tyre and Tarshish?
7 years they're gone.
70 years they're gone. Now, what do we know in retrospect? What's so significant about that number 7 years? It does say it, and obviously it's the lifetime of the king, right? Kings live 70 years, so I'm going to take away an entire monarchy away from God. But what we know in retrospect, 70 years, right, is going to come into fruition. This prophecy that he makes right here, right, comes true because that's how long they're going to be exiled, right? So the Chaldeans, right, he's like, look, this has happened before. Look at what happened to the Chaldeans, right? So they were a group of people who occupied the area of Babylon, and just like they went down, you're going to go down Tyre, right? So he's like, This is an example. Look to this example. God's done it before. God's about to do it again this time as well. Right? So once again, we talked about this. It was a fortress island city with walls, right? And then obviously here, right, in verse 15, right? That is the amount of time, cross-reference Jeremiah 29:10. This is the amount of time that they're going to be in captivity, right? So he's calling, right? This is much better than Perea calling his home run shot, right? Which is, I miss baseball. I'm watching.
I don't know, I feel like it was kind of garbage.
It was a garbage season.
You got it.
Says the percussionist, Megan.
I wouldn't have said it.
But make sure you do. And then finally, John, verses 17 and 18.
At the end of 70 years, the Lord will deal with Tyre. She will return to her lucrative prostitution and ply her trade with all of her kingdoms on the face of the earth. Yet her profit and her earnings will be set apart for the Lord. They will not be stored up or hoarded. Her profits will go to those who live before the Lord for abundant food and fine clothes.
John, what happens to that 70 years later?
To Tyre or to
Yeah, what happens to Tyre 70 years later?
they're restored, but the goods restored to God.
Isn't that crazy? He's going to tear you down. Everything that you've got is going to be wasted away. You're going to come back up. But you're going to come back up as a land, as a nation that will honor God. So if you guys fast forward, especially to the 300s, 400s, 500s, Tyre is very, very close to Constantine, to the very heart of what will become the Christian empire that will live 1,000 years until it falls later on. So it's crazy when you look at prophecy, you know, and look, we've got the benefit of having, this is 700 BC, 2,700 years of history to see Isaiah's prophecies come true.
So just for clarification, I'm confused by this because it's saying the Lord will deal with Tyre and she will return to her lucrative prostitution and will ply her trade with all kingdoms on the face of the earth. So when she returns, it'll be
After captivity.
When returning back to bad ways of earning money, and then God uses that money.
So obviously the word prostitution here.
What's
is a
that mean
metaphor. The word prostitution here is all the ways that you're making money.
Okay.
Right? So everything that you did before with trade,
It just makes you think-
commerce. No.
And they just earn money however bad way you can. Yeah, God's gonna use it for good.
God's going to use it for you. Go ahead.
I thought whenever the Bible referenced prostitution in terms like this, that they were talking about idols.
Yes.
You know, they're lusting after all the different idols.
Yes.
So were they talking about money? Or is the money?
So they're gonna return back to bad ways of earning money, but God's gonna use those bad ways, use that money for good.
All of it. So prostitution, worldly ways, was money, idols, worship, lifestyle. And Isaiah saying, look, I'm going to tear down the nation. I'm going to tear down Tyre for 70 years. When it comes back, you guys are going to go back to that. But I'm going to take you back to that. And all of those things will glorify me in the future. Right? So I asked this question. How does Isaiah's pronouncement against Tyre reveals God's justice? And Pastor talked about this a lot this morning, right? With the justice and compassion that God had for his people. Jonah wanted vengeance, and God said no. And here Isaiah says something very, very similar. But what does that say about God's justice? What do y'all think?
God's justice is about glorifying him, about what he can use for things to be good. So we want justice because we want to see people suffer. We want to see the other side get called out for untruthful things. We want to see all of those things in our lifetime, which we might not see, but God brings justice. Like he's even doing that where we're like, what, how can you allow bad things to continue on? But he's going to say, yet her profit and her earnings will be set apart for the Lord. He's saying, I will still use it. I will still get justice from this sin and from this bad. And that's a super hard thing, especially nowadays, to even wrap your mind around, because I want justice. You know, there's so many areas where you want truth to be seen and spoken and brought out or whatever. And God's justice is different. Like it's not like he's not saying things right now. He's doing his things. He's doing his work, but his justice is different than ours. Our justice is vengeance, I think.
Our justice isn't. What do your kids say?
That's not fair.
That's not fair. So what do they want? What do people want if it's against their enemies? Just like Hannah said, right? They want like ultimate punishment against their enemies, because that's justice. But what do you want if it's against you? Mercy, grace, forgiveness, right?
Have you ever asked your kid what their punishment should be?
Grace. I said,
What is Congress?
Oh, he just like hems and haws and doesn't say anything.
It says, don't give me a snake.
Yeah, don't give me a snake. That's what he says.
Isaac literally asks for grace. Could you show me grace this time? Like, why don't you show me grace beforehand?
What does it say about God's grace, right? We so much want, especially if it's against us. Gosh, I would love, forgive me for saying this, I'm sorry. This is a Larry the Cable Guy, moment where I say, Lord, I apologize. I have prayed for cancer for Nick Saban. Like I have prayed destruction on my enemies.
Well, he has COVID, so.
Huh?
He has COVID, so. He just all
Oh, positive.
You have to be negative test in like 2 days.
But it's horrible, right? And it shows my heart. Like and last week, Justin Turner, right, like celebrating on the field without a mask on, and I was like, no man, y'all slammed AJ Hinch for a year. Y'all slammed.
He was already with them for 7 innings before that. It's not like it changed.
But I wanted a year for Justin Turner. Like I wanted justice, right? Like I kicked him out of baseball for a year. I mean, like, and that's my heart. And he's like, we want that justice. And the foresight and the forgiveness of God. And especially, the concept of these are my people. I'm going to love them, to forgive them, and I'm going to make them prosper. Hard. I mean, and that's hard. Now, even if God loves them, even if they're my enemies. Harrison, Braggers, Tucker, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is humbling for us to realize, because we want to be right and we want to think that we know. And I think, God teaches us, or teaches me at least time and time again, I am God and you are my creation. And although you think you may know, kind of like he told Job, who are you? Where are you? How long have you been alive? It's very humbling to, and very difficult for me to maintain that structure of God is first, God knows all, God is in control. And although I think I know best, I'm not God.
Thank you. Anything for you, Andrew? I'm looking at Ross hold Levi. And one of these days, Levi's going to do something to Rod, to Ethan. And Ethan's going to come over and Ethan's going to tell him. Just like we tell all of our siblings. You know what Ethan's going to want? Ethan's going to want absolute discipline. He needs a spank. right? Lydia comes to me and says, Isaac did this to me. And I'm like, what do you want me to do to Isaac? And she wants like ultimate punishment for her. she's like mean about it. She wants ultimate punishment for him. And I'm the father of both of them. And so I just think about it from this capacity. God is showing mercy, even on our enemies, even when our enemies do wrong to us. And he's saying this to Tyre, right? He's like, I'm going to go down there. And I'm going to raise them up as well. Right?
I think that's a good way that you said that, because it's really hard for me to think. God looks at us very differently than we think. You know, like you're saying, Lydia, you love Lydia, you love Isaac.
And I want utter destruction.
She wants to destroy Isaac and wants you on her side to do that. And if we're asking God, destroy these people, you know, because we all have those feelings, you know, bring them to justice, bring them right, you know, he sees them in a different way than we do.
No, because, you know, I'm sure Emery never wants vengeance on Alice.
Allison's sweet. What would she want vengeance on?
They're still sisters. They're all sisters.
Well, it's worth noting that this is not the only punishment that's going to happen. This is then being judged and punished as a nation. But all individuals are still going to just stand before the thrones and they're going to judge out the books in the face.
Yeah.
All those individuals. So this is not the only punishment. This is just their punishment as a nation.
Yeah. But I mean, you know, like I think about what Pastor talked about today, you know, with Nineveh and that type of justice and forgiving, compassion, and same here, right, with Tyre. Which is funny that this would happen because remember, from chapters 13 to 22, Isaiah's here prophesying fire and brimstone. Yeah, my God's big enough to judge all y'all. But here in 23, he's like, no, I'm going to judge you, but I'm also going to come back and restore you. So this has been about God reigns, and God reigns over all of us. God's going to reign even after he judges y'all. Right. So next week we jump to chapter 25, and we'll talk a little bit about how God is going to save, and what Isaiah, the message Isaiah gives to the people of Judah at that time about what God can do to save them. Lauren, the floor is yours.
That's right. No more announcements, right? Okay. Thank you, Mike.